bar graphs are the most common on the GD test. Now, when we talk about graphs, and you're going to see there's actually six of them, I think, six types. These are the six common types. So we're going to deal with bar graphs, line graphs, pie charts, scatter plots, histograms, dot plots. We're gonna describe each of them. But our first one is going to be bar graphs. Now, the thing to understand about the graphs and the charts is you're going to see them on the math test. You'll see them on the social studies test, and you'll also see them on the science test. So when you're looking at these graphs and we're talking about them, you're going to see them in relation to math. But just know that these graphs and these charts can all be displaying stuff that can be talked about in a social studies class or in a science class. Okay, so let's go ahead and start discussing the different ideas of bar chart. So when you look at a bar chart, there's a couple of things to notice, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to this bar chart here. I like this bar chart to start with. So I want to start with this bar chart. Now, bars, as you can tell, that's how they get the name because these things look like candy bars. So that's the name bar chart. So bar charts, what makes a bar chart special? Now, this is what you need to really consider. Okay, so all of these charts are different and they all have something unique that makes them special, something that'll make this chart different from other charts. And what makes this chart special is the fact that it's able to show quantity. So when you see quantity, you're going to see quantity of different items or maybe the same item, but they actually just break it up. So it's bar charts' whole idea is to show quantity. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Okay. So if you'll see that this is sales first day of the month. So this is called a title. Okay. Every graph will have them. They're usually located on the top. Okay. So this is first day of the month smoothie sales. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Now, when you look at these bar charts, you can see that you have uh, an up and down, and we're not going to say up and down. We're going to use the word vertical. And we're going to use the word horizontal to describe different places on this graph. Okay, when I say vertical, I'll say, hey, look at the vertical axis. And when I mean vertical axis, I mean looking at what's listed here on this section. And what you can see listed on the vertical axis, the section, is the month. You'll see that you have July, August, September, October, November, December. Then I'll say, hey, what is listed on the horizontal axis? And you would say, oh, well, that's actually the number of sales, the quantity. I'd say, yeah, exactly. So if I asked you a simple question here and I said, hey, which month shows the largest quantity of sales for the first day of the month? You would look based on the one that goes out the furthest, because as you can tell, these numbers are getting larger as I move to the right. So as I move to the right, my numbers get larger. So I'm looking for a bar chart that goes furthest to the right. And as you can see, probably the easiest one to see is August. You'll see that it goes out this far. I'd say, okay, so easily I can see that the bar for August goes out the furthest to the right. Now, if I asked you, hey, what are the number of sales? What is that number that we would relate to that? Now, this is where it can get just a little tricky. You have to be very careful when you do this, is if I zoom in a little bit, you'll actually see that when we're looking at the chart, you'll see that the chart actually goes from 10 to 20 to 30. And you'll also see that you have these, we call these hash marks. Do you see those? We say that it has hash marks. And I'd say, okay, now here's the thing. You can't always assume that because this is 10 and this is 20, that there are 9 hash marks between, right? Because if there's 9 hash marks between, then you would say this is 9, this first one would be 11, second 12, 13, 14. You can't make that assumption, and that would be a terrible assumption to make. You actually want to count them to make sure that, yes, is it true that if I start counting these hash marks for starting at 10, that I will reach 20 and I'll reach it correctly? So let's see, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yes. So I am these hash marks, there are 10 hash marks. There is 10 separations, 10 degrees from 10 to 20. That's actually how they're being broken up. So knowing that, I can actually now come to where my chart is when I asked you for August and say, okay, where is this? So what you want to do is you want to look down. And remember, we're trying to just be as linear as we can. And it can be kind of hard because, as you can see already, this is not a straight line. So you kind of want to try to be as straight as possible, look straight down, and you'd say, well, I see that it's going to hit the 32 mark, right? That second hash mark, which makes it 30, 31, 32. So if I asked you, hey, how many sales were in August? You can easily say, okay, I see how far the bar goes, and if I look down, it'll be at 32. Let's try another one. What if I asked you, hey, which month had the least number of sales? So again, you'd have to look at the whole bar chart and find the one with the least. Do you see the one with the least number of sales? Did you see that it's December? It is December, and it goes out this far. Now, we already know that there's 9, or I'm sorry, 10 slash marks, or 9 hash marks actually, right? Between 10 and 20. So we can make that same assumption for between 0 and 10, where that first one would be 1. So if I asked you, hey, how many sales were in December? You'd say, oh, only 1. So this is exactly how you would read a bar chart. They're not that too complicated. The one thing I do want to add is a little bit more vocabulary. So you already have vertical axis, which means the stuff listed on the up and bottom, or top and bottom, sorry, up and down section of the graph. And if I said, hey, look at the horizontal, you'd say, okay, I'm looking at the left and right, or the bottom part of this graph. I'd say, yes, you are. There is one more vocabulary word that I want to add because you'll hear me discuss it as we go through other videos. So what I want to add is the word independent variable and dependent variable. So these are actually more of a science kind of vocabulary. So I want to add this to the bar chart because it makes it a little easier to understand it right here. Okay, so the independent variable is actually listed on the horizontal axis. So whatever is listed here on the horizontal axis, this is what you call the independent variable. VARIABL. There we go. Sorry about all that. So the independent variable is always listed on the horizontal axis. The dependent variable is listed on the vertical axis. Again, this is science language, so no need to get too involved in it right now. I will give you a small description of what it means to be independent. Independent just means time or number. Like there's nothing you can really, it's just moving. It's just showing. Now, dependent means, well, based on the number of sales or the time, this is what I see. And this is what I mean by that. You can see that the number is increasing, right, for the number of sales as I move to the right. There is nothing I can do about that. Now, depending on what that quantity is, it depends, right? It depends on the month that you're looking at. So what's dependent is the month. And as you can see, August has the most. December has the least. So depending on what month you're looking at, now you will know, well, this is what's dependent is it's not the number of sales, it's actually the month that you're in depends on what number you're seeing for these marks. That's kind of a small understanding or a small way of explaining independent versus dependent variable. You will hear more of it as you start to hear a few more questions, but just know that it goes along with graphs and charts when we look at horizontal axis and vertical axis. You will hear it again. Okay. Okay, we're going to do a couple of examples. 3, 2, 1. Okay, now we're going to look at a couple of examples. What I want to do is I want to zoom in on this question here. Now, let's go ahead and look at the question for number 11. Okay, so when we look at this, before, one of the good habits of doing or chart reading is, first off, the first thing we kind of want to always do is read the title. Because by reading the title, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. And these are very descriptive titles. They're not meant to be mystery titles. I mean, we're not reading novels here. So when you read these titles, they're pretty descriptive of exactly what you're looking at. So this is the number of pages in a chapter. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to do. The second thing we kind of want to do is look at our variables. Now, remember when I said variables, I used that word and I said independent and dependent. So when I say look at the variables, I mean, hey, look at what's on the horizontal axis and what's on the vertical axis. You want to see what variables are being measured. And as you can see, you'd say, well, I see on my horizontal axis, it's the number of chapters, right? Or the chapter numbers, whatever, right? 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, 4, 5. And then on the vertical axis, I see the number of pages, and it actually increases, right? It starts at 0, and then it increases as I go up. Okay, so those are my variables being described or being compared or being measured, however you want to describe it. Okay. Number 3. This is a nice little way of doing some very fast analysis. And what I mean by quick analysis is this: look at the graph, and I'd say, hey, based on what you're looking at, can you see which bar is the longest or highest? So I would ask you, what is high? What is low? And what we're looking at is we're looking at the actual bars, right? So we're going to find the high bar and we're going to find the low bar. Now, and I'm just talking about just quick looking. So quick looking, I'd say, okay, the highest bar already is having 4 chapters, and then we have the highest number of pages. So if I said, okay, which chapter has the highest number of pages? You'd say, oh, that's number 4. I'd say exactly. And I'd say, okay, just a quick look, which chapter has the least number of pages? You'd say, oh, quick look, number 3. So low, number 3. This is a very good analysis to do in the beginning, because when it comes to question asking, when it comes to the GED test, highs and lows are very common type of questions. So if you can do it kind of in the beginning before you even dive into the question itself, you're setting yourself up for getting through the question a little quicker. So again, step one, we look at the title, we say, okay, this is the number of pages in a chapter. Second, I'm looking, what are my variables? I'm looking at the number, the chapter and the actual number of pages. And I'd say, okay, what's high and what's low? I see that the chapter 4 has the highest number of pages and chapter 3 has the lowest number of pages. And I'd say, exactly. So I'd say, okay, now that you kind of just did that small analysis to prepare yourself, because the question is going to definitely be about what you just looked at. So let's take a look at it. It says, Katie is reading a 200-page book that is divided into 5 chapters. The bar graph shows the number of pages in each chapter. Okay, so now I've gotten just a little bit of information, a little bit more. So now I know that that chart or that book actually has 200 pages. Now, a couple of things. I could have gotten that information without them telling me that there was 200 pages. And can you look at the graph? If I asked you, hey, what is the total number of pages in that book? Could you have figured it out? How would you have done that? Take a look at the graph and see if you can come up with a way of figuring out the total number of pages. All right, did you see it? So what you could have done, and this is something you're going to want to do, is take a look at every single one of these bars. You'd see that that bar is at 40. This bar is at 30. Okay, so already what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, each chapter, what I'm doing is I'm actually finding the total of each one. So 40 and 30, that's already 70, right? And now I look at the next one and that's 20. So now I'm up to 90. Then I look at this one, this is 70. So now I'm at 160 plus another 40. That kicks me to 200. Now, this is something you may have to do on your own. So be prepared for that. It's very common in bar charts, because it shows quantity, is for them to say, hey, what is the percentage of this? What is the percentage of that? And in order to figure out percentage, you need to know the total. They won't, in this situation, you got lucky where they actually gave you the total, but that is not very common. Most of the time, you're going to have to compute it yourself. And you do that by getting a number for each bar and then totaling them up yourself. So as you can see now that this question is, what percent of pages is in even number chapters? So now here's the question itself. I'm looking for even number chapters and I'm trying to figure out how many pages are in those even number chapters. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out what percentage of pages are in even numbered chapters. Go ahead and pause now. All right. Did you do it? Okay, let's come on back. So even number, that means everything divided by 2, which is 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, right? So we're going to look at chapter 2 and 4 because those are the only ones being listed that are even. The others are odd. So in chapter 2, I have 30 pages. In chapter 4, I have 70 pages. If I add these two together, it gives me 100 pages. So they want this as a percentage. So in order to figure out this as a percentage, I'd say, well, I have to divide. This is part divided by whole. So I would take my part, which is 100, and I'm going to divide it by the total, which is 200. If I divide those two things, I get the number 0.5. And then in order to change this into a decimal or a percentage, I have to multiply it by 100 and then slap the percent symbol, which means this is now 50%. A. Let's try another. Okay. Look at this one. This one might seem a little blurry to you. Let me see if I can find something else. Hold on one second. Oh, this is good. Here, this is a nice clean one. All right. Okay, taking a look at this graph right here. Okay, let's go through our first step. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go through the first step, the second step, and the third step. Do you remember what they are? Can you go ahead and go through them and come up with an idea for the first step, second step, and third step? What'd you come up with? Pause the video. All right. Remember, step 1, look at the title. Minutes of homework. Okay, good. Step 2, what are the variables? right? The variable is the teachers themselves and the number of minutes. Those are the two variables being compared. Third, what did you come up with? Did you get a high number? High. Well, you'd say, well, Varen, there's an issue with this one. I see that there's two types of bars. And I'd say, okay, good, exactly. Did you look at this thing here? In this thing, what we call this is a key. Now, keys will show up when the information is maybe getting a little more complicated. For instance, here in this situation, you'll see that you have a red bar and a, let's call it, I don't know, blue bar, purple bar, whatever you want to call that. So because I have two different ones, they have to label them differently. So because they're labeling them differently, they're giving each one a different name, which is one is Wednesday, the other one's Thursday. They're going to give us, going to show us a key so that we know what we're looking at. Now, let's go ahead and say, okay, because there's two different bars here, when I talk about high, you need to do both. You need to find out one for Wednesday and also one for Thursday. And I'm just talking about quick analysis, right? So we look at high and say, okay, so first off, Wednesday, my red bar, the highest part is right here. It's going to be the number 16. Did you see that? Now I'd say, okay, well, what about the blue bar, highest amount? You'd say, oh, right here. It's at 20. I'd say exactly. Now, another thing you also want to do is not only did you know, I say, oh, the number is 16. Oh, the number is 20. Also take a look at, hey, which teacher was that? Look at the other variable also. That way you're not only seeing the number itself, you're also seeing the other variable. Remember the other variable was teachers? So go ahead and do that too. So I'd say, okay, so Wednesday highest is 16 with Ms. Jones. Also the highest is Thursday at 20 with Miss Jones. I'd say, okay, good, 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 good. Hey, what's the low stuff? What's the low stuff also for Wednesday and also for Thursday? And say, okay, go ahead and do that. So take a look at it, like, okay, let's start off with Wednesday. Low bar, low red one. Okay, I see the low red one. The low red one's right here with 6 with Mrs. Brown. I'd say, okay, great. What about the low for Thursday? That's the blue one or the purple one. Say, the lowest purple one. There it is. I see it. Looks like it's 10 with Mrs. Wilson. Or Williams, sorry. So this one has two different teachers, but again, we still found the high bars, we found the low bars. And I'd say, okay, great. That's your basic analysis. Go ahead and read the question now and see if you can come up with an answer. Go ahead and pause the video and read the question and come up with an answer. All right, did you come up with one? All right, I'm going to take a look at it. It says on Thursday, how much longer did it take to finish Miss Jones' homework than Mrs. Williams? Okay, so as you can tell, we're looking at Thursday. So because we're looking at Thursday, you have to be careful about which bar you're looking at, remember? Because the red bar represents Wednesday. The blue bar actually represents Thursday, and we should be looking at the blue bars, no red bars, okay? So we should be looking at blue bars, not the red bars. Okay. They're also telling us to look at specific people. Did you see that? Specific teachers. They're saying Miss Jones and Miss Williams. So we're looking at the blue bar for Miss Jones and Miss Williams. All right, here's Miss Jones, blue bar 20. Here's Miss Williams, blue bar 10. Oh, again, hey, did you notice that's a high and a low? Did you see that for the blue bar? Oh, interesting, right? Okay, so the question is this. How much longer did it take to finish homework for Miss Jones than it did for Miss Williams? So how much longer? This is a subtraction type problem because you're trying to find out the difference between the two. Because again, they're not the same number. They are different. One is 20, one is 10. Now, the difference between them says, okay, how much more does it take to get to the 20? You'd say, well, this can either, I could say, well, this is 10 plus 10 to get to 20, but a lot of times most people will use subtraction and they'd say, okay, let me go ahead and just do 20 minus 10, and that leaves 10 minutes. So how much longer did it take? It took 10 more minutes to finish the homework for Miss Jones than it did for Mrs. Williams. Good luck with this. Keep trying.